The old DHS Secretary is out, and Mullins is in. So what does that mean for you? What does a change at the Department of Homeland Security mean if you are a naturalized citizen, a green card holder, or someone who is here on a visa? Today, I want to walk you through the possible changes that could come with a new DHS Secretary, but I also want to give you practical solutions so you know how to move forward. I have been undocumented. I have gone through the immigration system from the inside, and now I am an immigration attorney. My job is to make sure you are aware of the latest immigration updates, but not just to hand you information. My goal is to help you think strategically, prepare carefully, and plan ahead so you are not caught off guard. So let's get into it. Under the previous DHS leadership, many people felt like the system was chaotic. Some people looked at it and said enforcement was more aggressive than ever. Other people saw it and said, finally, there is some enforcement happening. No matter which side of that discussion you are on, the truth is that it was intense. Immigration enforcement was extremely visible, and many families felt the pressure. What stood out to me the most was that there were reports of U.S. citizens being mistakenly detained by ICE, and there were also reports of U.S. citizens being removed. In some places, the mistakes were so serious that people were asking how they happened in the first place. Was it a problem with leadership? Was it a lack of training? Was it a lack of coordination? We may never know every detail. But one thing is clear. The rules and the consequences are real, and when mistakes happen, real families suffer. Now that there is a new secretary in place, and based on the background of Mullins, there are three major things you can expect under a new DHS direction. The first thing you can expect is an overhaul of enforcement by ICE. What does that mean in plain language? It means they are likely going to rethink how enforcement is carried out. That could mean a more targeted approach, or it could mean more raids and more operations, but with better coordination and more planning. It does not automatically mean less enforcement. In fact, it could mean the opposite. It may mean stronger enforcement, but with a more organized strategy. So if you are hoping that a leadership change means immigration enforcement will suddenly disappear, that is probably not the reality. A new DHS secretary still has to align with the administration's broader goals, and those goals usually include stronger immigration enforcement and tighter border control. At the same time, they also have to pay attention to the public reaction. When U.S. citizens are mistakenly detained, when lawful residents are held unnecessarily, or when people with valid visas are caught in the middle, there is a lot of backlash. That public pressure may influence how enforcement is carried out, but it does not mean enforcement will stop. What I foresee is more targeted ICE activity, more carefully planned operations, and a stronger focus on certain categories of people. That could include more stops, more questioning, and more attention to documents and status. Even if the overall policy stays aggressive, the method may change. They may try to be more deliberate, more data-driven, and more organized in how they enforce immigration laws. So yes, there could still be more enforcement, but it may look different from what we saw before. The second thing you may see is broader DHS priorities. The Department of Homeland Security is not only about immigration. It also includes border security, cybersecurity, disaster response, and other national safety priorities. So a change in leadership can shift attention and resources across the department. We may see more money and more focus going toward border operations. We may also see more attention to cybersecurity, especially if the department decides that online threats, data protection, and digital screening are becoming more important. We could also see changes in how internal relief efforts are handled. For example, if there are emergencies, hurricanes, or other disasters, DHS resources can affect how quickly help is delivered through agencies that fall under that larger umbrella. When priorities shift, one area can gain resources while another area gets less attention. That is why a leadership change matters even for people who think they are far away from border issues. DHS decisions can affect the whole system, from enforcement to processing to disaster-related support. The third thing you can expect is a shift in funding. If more funding is directed to border security, enforcement operations, and cybersecurity, then there may be less flexibility in other parts of the immigration system. That can affect people who are applying for a green card, people who are waiting for work-based immigration decisions, and people pursuing cases like EB-1 or EB-2 national interest waiver petitions. If priorities move, resources move with them, and that can affect how quickly cases are reviewed and how aggressively enforcement is carried out. So when people ask me what this change means, I tell them, it may mean more targeted enforcement, more emphasis on border security, and a possible shift in how DHS allocates its money and attention. If they decide to put more effort into online screening and data review, then social media, digital footprints, and public online behavior may matter even more. If they decide to focus on broader security tools, then agencies may become even more active in reviewing records, checking histories, and cross-referencing information across systems. Those are the three major changes I think you should keep in mind. But the most important question is not just what DHS might do. The more important question is, what can you do about it? That is where I want to tell you a story about one of my clients, because it shows how even U.S. citizens can get caught up in immigration problems when the system is moving fast and the facts are not fully understood. I had a client who came to me with criminal charges in his history. There were felony allegations involved, and at that point, he was in ICE custody. When I first looked at the case, it was clear that the situation was serious. But one thing I noticed right away was that he had not actually been convicted of those charges. That matters. In immigration, allegations, arrests, charges, and convictions do not always mean the same thing, and the distinction can completely change a case. As I kept reviewing the file, I looked at how he came into the United States. I saw that he entered as a green card holder, and his U.S. citizen mother had petitioned for him. That made me pause. I asked the key question, when did his mother become a U.S. citizen? Because if she naturalized before he turned 18, then under the law he could have derived citizenship automatically. In other words, even though he entered as a green card holder, he may have become a U.S. citizen by operation of law without even realizing it. That is why these cases matter so much. If a parent petitions for a child, the child enters as a lawful permanent resident, and then the parent becomes a U.S. citizen before the child turns 18, the child may automatically become a U.S. citizen too, depending on the facts. So my team and I went back, looked deeper into the record, and worked to get the naturalization certificate for the mother. Once we found it, the timeline became clear. Yes, the mother became a U.S. citizen before my client turned 18. That meant he was, in fact, a U.S. citizen. We called the family, and they were relieved to hear the news, but they were also scared. They could not believe that he had been sitting in ICE custody while being a U.S. citizen. Their first question was obvious. How did DHS or ICE miss this? That is the painful part of these cases. Sometimes people assume every agency has already checked every detail, but that is not always true. Sometimes the information is there, but it has not been fully reviewed. Sometimes the records are incomplete. Sometimes the officers are under pressure and do not catch the full legal issue. From there, we had to move quickly. The clock was ticking. They did not want to give him bond, even though he had not been convicted. In immigration court, depending on the allegations and the posture of the case, a judge can still make difficult custody decisions even when the person has not been convicted of a crime. That is why custody cases can become so urgent and so stressful. We had to file motions, push the issue, and keep the case moving while the government was preparing to proceed with removal. At one point, we could not even locate him easily because he had already been transferred to Miami and was being prepared for deportation. We sent the documentation to ICE, but they were not willing to accept it right away. We explained again and again that he was a U.S. citizen and that his mother had naturalized before he turned 18. We also explained that he needed time for the proper paperwork, including an N-600, if necessary, and that he should not be removed from the country while the citizenship issue was being resolved. Long story short, the day before the flight, we were able to get in with a motion and argue that this was a U.S. citizen who was about to be deported. That case taught me something important, and it is something I want you to remember. A lot of the people working in immigration enforcement are not fully aware of every law, every exception, or every procedural detail. That does not make the system fair, but it does explain why mistakes happen. It helps explain why some U.S. citizens end up detained, why some lawful residents are held longer than they should be, and why people with valid status sometimes get swept into problems that should have been caught earlier. Now, I know someone may say, well, if he had not gotten into trouble, he would not have been in that position. And yes, I understand that point. But the law still matters. Even people with problems in their past can still have rights, and even people with complicated histories may still be citizens. In his case, this was something that happened years ago. He is in his 30s now. He was not convicted. That is why I am hoping that under this new secretary, there is better training for ICE officers, for DHS employees, and for everyone who is involved in enforcement decisions. Better training means fewer mistakes, fewer unlawful detentions, and fewer families being put through unnecessary trauma. So what should you do now under this new DHS environment? Whether you overstayed a visa, whether you are a green card holder, or whether you are a naturalized citizen, there are 5 things I want you to focus on because none of these situations should be taken lightly. Number 1. Fix your taxes. A lot of people think taxes are only a financial issue, but they can become an immigration issue too. If your taxes are not filed properly, if there are unresolved tax problems, or if your records do not match what you are telling immigration, that can cause trouble. It may complicate a family petition, it may create problems during naturalization, and it may lead to questions about whether you have been truthful and consistent. If you need to file late returns, correct mistakes, or resolve old issues, take care of that as soon as possible. Do not wait until you are in the middle of an immigration process to discover a problem. Number 2. Avoid long trips outside the United States if you are a green card holder. A lot of people think, I have a green card, so I can leave whenever I want. That is not always how it works. If you are outside the country for a long time, especially for 6 months or more, immigration officers can start asking questions about whether you still really live here. If you stay out too long and you do not have the right paperwork, they may argue that you abandoned your permanent resident status. That is why long trips should be handled carefully. If you know you are going to be abroad for an extended period, you need to plan ahead and understand the risks before you leave. And let me be clear. People will say these rules have existed for a long time, and that is true. But old rules that were not being enforced as aggressively can suddenly become very important when enforcement is stricter. That is what I mean when I say enforcement is stronger now. A rule that was once treated as a technicality can suddenly become the basis for a real problem. So if you are a green card holder, be careful with your travel history, your time outside the United States, and the documents you carry when you return. Number 3. If you are filing a marriage-based case, or if your case is based on marriage and you are filing a first petition or removal of conditions, strengthen your evidence. Do not think a weak file is enough. Do not think a random tax return, a lease that is barely connected to your real life, or a bank account you never use will automatically carry the case. Immigration officers look at whether the marriage is real, whether you built a life together, and whether the evidence tells a consistent story. If the relationship is genuine, then gather the documents that show it clearly. That means joint records, shared finances, real living arrangements, consistent tax filings, insurance, photos, correspondence, travel records, and other proof that the relationship is authentic. If there are children involved, that may help the case, but it still does not replace solid evidence. Even if the petition is part of a larger family process, they may go back and review the marriage carefully to make sure it was real from the beginning. So take marriage-based filings seriously, and do not assume weak evidence will be enough. Number 4. Clean up your social media. This is one of the easiest things you can control, and yet people still ignore it. DHS and other agencies are paying more attention to online behavior, digital footprints, and public content. That does not mean you need to be afraid to exist online. It does mean you should be smart and consistent. Do not post things that could be misunderstood. Do not share harmful or hateful content. And do not put up material that creates unnecessary questions about your credibility, your character, or your intent. If you are applying for a visa, a green card, naturalization, or any other immigration benefit, your online presence should not create problems for you. I have seen people get flagged because of things they posted, shared, or liked. That includes immigrants with pending cases and even U.S. citizens dealing with criminal matters. So if you know you are going to file an immigration case, review your social media, clean it up, and make sure it does not raise avoidable concerns. It is one of the simplest ways to protect yourself. Number 5. Before you file for naturalization, do a full audit of your previous immigration history. I am seeing too many cases where people decide to apply for U.S. citizenship, and then immigration starts looking back at everything. They review prior applications, earlier statements, travel history, prior marriages, address history, criminal history, and anything else that was ever submitted. Sometimes people think their old issues are behind them, but the moment they file for citizenship, those old issues can come back into focus. That can delay the case, cause requests for evidence, or even lead to denial and further immigration problems. That is why I strongly recommend a full review before filing the N-400. Check your old applications, check your old statements, check your travel records, check any names you may have used in the past. Check every detail that could be compared against your current filing. If there is a problem, it is much better to find it before you file than to let the government find it after you have already placed yourself in the middle of a new review. A careful audit can save you time, money, stress, and possible denial. I hope this helps. I am your immigration attorney. Go. If this video was useful to you, like it, share it, and subscribe so you can help someone else who may need this information, and so we can keep bringing you more updates and more guidance.